I think the main thing from me, from my point of view, is to give people solutions. People are looking for solutions. You know, how can I live better? You know, what can I do in my home to use less energy, and how can I engage our neighborhood in these issues, and what can I tell my children? As a child, when I was probably, I think, 5, 6 years old, my family for a time lived outside of Montgomery, Alabama, and we had a little 8-acre spread. And, you know, I just remember how wonderful it was living in the country and having fresh air to breathe. And, you know, we had horses, and we spent a lot of time outdoors. My sister and I played in the creek, you know, away from the house there. And I can remember my dad plowing a garden behind a horse with a hand plow. And so I think the first, if you will, connection to the earth began back then. Fast forward to teenage years, and of course in the 60s, and I'm a child of the 60s. We all know about the cultural revolution that was going on, and environmentalism was certainly a part of that. And so that was kind of the second phase of gaining an understanding about what was happening to our environment. But then let's fast forward to when I met my wife, Rose Lane, and we became serious and decided to tie the knot. And she said, well, come on out to the country and meet my family. And I said, well, tell me about your family. And she said, my family are farmers. So the fact is they've been connected to the land for generations, tending forest land, tending cattle and livestock, and tending the earth. And so when I began to spend time with them on the weekends or holidays or whenever I could, you know, all this passion and dedication to the land began to rub off on me. And then in 1981, her grandmother passed away and left her about 1,000 acres of land, and it became our responsibility to carry on what we saw as a heritage of stewardship of the land. So that's when I really began to dig in. I went to the library, I checked out books, I went to meetings and seminars on land use. I went to other landowners and asked them questions, and I began to gain an understanding. I eventually enrolled in a correspondence course when I was touring with the Fabulous Thunderbirds back in the early 80s, and that was very helpful to me. But then, you know, there's nothing like hands-on experience, so what I really gained was mostly getting my hands dirty on the place all these years now.
Yeah, and I think not everyone appreciates that a worked landscape, attended landscape, is very much an environmental asset. You know, sometimes there's this, oh, if you're cutting trees, then there's got to be a problem. Rene Dubose was the first person whose writing really familiarized me with the idea that a humanized landscape can be a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
That's clearly part of what you're focusing on?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no more important natural resource than that of wood. You know, I mean, you think about it, so many wonderful things come from that resource of wood. That marvelous thing called a piano.
Yeah, my guitar over there.
Get your guitar, the furniture, the bookshelves behind you, fine furniture that we all enjoy, building materials for our homes. And let's remember, you know, this is a material that is natural, organic, and most importantly, it is renewable. You know, so when you really look at the big picture, you realize that the use of wood is a great thing, as long as you're using it sustainably, and as long as you're always planting, managing, and growing more timber than we're harvesting.
Yeah, so then let's fast forward another notch to MNN, Mother Nature Network. Had you already, I can't remember if you had already written a book at the point when, before you were getting involved with this.
The first one was called Forever Green, The History and Hope of the American Forest. And the reason I wanted to engage in that was because in my conversations with people, I would understand that there's so much that people don't get, or there's so much misinformation or misunderstanding about how we manage our timber, you know, how we use the resource of wood and so forth. And so I wanted to tackle that. And, you know, the truth is America did have a period of time in its history when we did abuse the forest. You know, when we were moving ever westward clearing land for agriculture. We were building railroads eventually and using a lot of the wood for the railroads. And, we were not replacing what we were using. I think that was the main problem. Then you had a turnaround around the late 1800s, early 1900s, when you had Theodore Roosevelt and Gifford Pinchot and John Muir and others that said, wait a minute, we got to learn how to use these resources sustainably and be careful about how we manage them. And as a matter of fact, it was Gifford Pinchot that first brought the concept of forest management to the United States after studying it in Europe. So, these are important things to follow. But the main thing is that with the book Forever Green, I wanted to get that picture clear to people so they understood the history, but also understood what was going on at present and the fact that we are managing our forests very, very sustainably now. Here in the United States, there's still some pockets of trouble, as we know, in other parts of the globe. But we're doing a great job here, and it's something to be very proud of. So, after that book, I did a children's book called The Tree Farmer because I realized how important it was to get young people to understand the importance of the environment and the natural resources that we have. Having had those two books and having met my partner Joel Babbitt, who actually was the one that came to me and said, listen, I've got this idea about an environmental website. There's really no iconic site out there. And he asked me some questions. I said, yeah, Joel, you're right. There's a lot of mom and pop sites out there. There was at the time. There's governmental sites that are very accurate, but poorly written and you have to be an academic to understand. There's organizational sites that certainly mean well, but they're usually focused on one aspect of the environment, and they're looking for membership and donations and whatnot. So bottom line is we decided we would build it. And Joel, who has had a stellar career as an advertising and public relations guru, resigned his position as president of Grady International. And we put this together, and we started hiring people out of Atlanta, and we launched in January of '09. And my interest, Andrew, was because I saw it as a great broad platform. I've written a book, written a couple of books, and, maybe gave some speeches from time to time, but I thought, man, the internet is exploding, and if I can get these issues out on the internet, that's everything. So that was my motivation, and Joel and I started hiring the folks and putting it together. We launched in January of '09, and now we're getting over 10 million hits a month combined with our two sites.
That's pretty great. Can you put that in context? I think I saw somewhere in something I got from MNN that it's almost more than the EPA.
We did pass the EPA recently in number of visits per month, so that's tremendous. And we are now, we kind of jump between number one, number two, number three most visited environmental websites according to Alexa. Alexa is kind of like the Nielsen rating of websites. Right. And so in the science and environmental category, we're up there. So it's very heartening, exciting, and I have to say I'm very, very proud of the people that work for us at MNN. They just do a tremendous job. Good writing, good coverage. The site changes many, many times a day depending on what's going on. And now, as you know, the content over all those years is built up, and now we just have a tremendous amount of content that we can share with people.
And how do you see your site as fitting out in a world that's very polarized? There's a lot of, as I've said before, a lot of environmental websites are kind of like they put out couches and free drinks for people who think alike. Yeah. In other words, come here if you're like me, and we'll all be happy together in a little bubble and not deal with reality. I've seen that in some other environmental sites. Do you think that is not or a quality you have to worry about?
Our goal is to be mainstream, to not be political, non-political, not to have a slant. We're not trying to elect anyone. We're just trying to get the truth out there and try to also, I think the main thing from my point of view is to give people solutions. People are looking for solutions. How can I live better? What can I do in my home to use less energy? And how can I engage our neighborhood in these issues? And what can I tell my children? And So these are the things that we are trying to give honest, straightforward, easy to understand answers to at MNN, and I think we're getting better at it all the time, and I think the traffic says a lot for us.
The other thing that's, of course, having been blogging now since 2007, along with my other writing, the signal to noise ratio out there is just so. You have this great sense of the potential of the web to connect people and share and shape ideas, but then there's all this other stuff. The noise level is really high, and some people get burned out on that. Do you have goals going forward for the site that kind of cut through that?
What we're finding is that the people that come to us time and time again and then enjoy the site and browse a lot and are looking for these answers and solutions and information, education, they go beyond just the interest in the environment into social responsibility. So that's where we kind of see our future going, Andy, is that we think this is much broader than just environmental issues. For instance, one of our sponsors has a "Don't Text and Drive" campaign on our site. Now, that has nothing to do with the environment, but it's very socially responsible. So we're seeing that the people that have these concerns have broader concerns, and we're going to be addressing those as we go forward.
Along with your rock and roll piano, you also have done sort of swamp. You're an aficionado of kind of southern swamp piano. You had your own album. I mean, that may be not your phrase for it, but how important is that to you, the roots of music as it relates to these roots issues you talk about with forestry and other things?
Well, it's very important. People ask me my influences, and my first influence was my mother, but as I began to learn how to play the piano and broaden my horizons, so to speak, Ray Charles was my first big influence, and we had Ray's records around the house. But it was my sister that took me when I was probably maybe 13 years old, along with her date, older sister, took me to see Ray Charles live in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where I grew up. And it was just absolutely life-changing. I could not tell you how incredible it was. I'd never seen a band that tight, Fathead, Ray Charles, of course, is Ray Charles, but Fathead Newman on saxophone, the Raylettes, Billy Preston was playing the organ, and it was just such a tight band and so powerful and strong. So I left that building that night saying, well, I know I don't want to be a lawyer, a doctor, or anything else. If I could ever be in a band anywhere near that good and that powerful, that would be my goal. And then, I began to dig a little deeper. You mentioned swamp piano players, and I do like that phrase, by the way. But my last record was called Back to the Woods, and it is a tribute to the pioneers of blues piano. So we're talking about artists like Leroy Carr and some very obscure names. Otis Spann is not so obscure, but we covered Otis Spann there. We covered, I think, 5 Leroy Carr tracks, a guy named Jesse James, and Little Brother Montgomery. So these guys all influenced people that came before me, and that myself and others of my peers, and will continue to influence going forward. So it was a fun project to do.
So just the last question, Rolling Stones and sustainability.
Believe it or not, I think it was it might have been the 40 Licks tour that I got the band to agree to make the United Kingdom portion of that tour carbon neutral by engaging an outfit that was called Future Forest. And basically it's a carbon credit thing where you calculate, your transportation and carbon, and how much you're causing in carbon of transportation, the fans coming to the thing, so forth. And then you donate X amount of dollars to plant trees to offset that. And a lot of artists are doing that. Elton John's very engaged in that. Jack Johnson is another one, Bonnie Raitt, and we could go on and on. So I think a lot of artists are in tune with these issues.
But I was actually talking about human sustainability. How do you all do it?
That's a whole other discussion. But man, I tell people rock and roll keeps you young. And when you're passionate, you're a musician, Andy, you know, when you're passionate about music or about anything and you have this desire, you know, to continue to do it, whatever it is, I think it really does help to keep you young. It helps to keep you fresh. And, you know, we all love doing this. I mean, let's face it, I don't think the four Rolling Stones really want for too much these days, but they want to continue because they love what they do. And they're very, very good at it. And it brings a lot of joy to the fans, and it brings a lot of joy to ourselves.
Great. Well, it's been great sitting with you here. We'll get together in person sometime down the line again.
Absolutely. Anytime, Andy. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, Chuck. Hold on one second.